Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Overreaction Monday show here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Chad Hastings. This show brought to you,
Chad Hastings.
Boy, that was like just my default. That's Anwar Richardson, and I may call Chad Anwar later. Who knows? I'm just messing up names today. I do know one thing I will get right. Sponsors RogueShop.com. They've been the sponsor of the Overreaction Monday show for what seems like forever. They are Texas's home for legal CBD, THC, and so much more. Use that promo code Orange Bloods. Just go shopping around, man. Go to the website. I had 8 11-year-old kids in my house sleeping over on Saturday night. And had it not been for Rogue Shop, I might either be dead or have killed. I don't know. Like, it's just something about that many. I don't know how elementary school teachers do it. They all should just skip the line and go to heaven, Anwar. But nevertheless, I'm here. My sanity remains somewhat intact. And it's a good thing because there's a lot to talk about in Texas football, getting ready to do its thing in spring football. Your Sunday pulpit yesterday, I thought was really interesting in that it graded each position like a concern level. And it was such a good idea and such a good content piece. We thought we should probably do that today on the Overreaction Monday show.
Yeah. By the way, for context, were there like 8 like girls as well? Was that?
We had 5 girls and 3 boys total. That doesn't include like who was at the house until about 10:30 or 11 o'clock. That's just who stayed overnight.
That's a lot.
The weird thing is we had like 3 of the 8, which includes my 2 kids. So it wasn't 10, it was 8, including my 2. 2 of them, it was a boy and a girl that wanted to sleep in the same bed together. And at 11 years old, they could not understand why we and their parents had rules. And I had to explain to this young man, like, my man, you have got to figure out a way for there to be more than one pathway to happiness than one. I had to give him the old man and maybe even like divorced dad advice, even though that's not quite me yet, Anwar. I was like, hey, man, if you go around in life thinking there's only going to be one way for you to be happy, you ain't ever going to be happy.
Man, you better get a sleeping blanket, boy, because not on the Ketchum watch. That is not the problems that you need to have.
They even did the thing where they tried to tell us that their parents had approved it. And I was like, that just did not happen. I know this 11-year-old girl's mom and dad did not sign off on her sleeping in the same bed as an 11-year-old boy.
Oh, wait, so they think they're dating or something,
No,
right?
No. That's the thing. It was so much more innocent than that. They're really just friends. And like, he couldn't understand why there was even a fuss. Because he's not at that point where he likes girls like that yet. Or at least consciously he doesn't. So he was just like, I don't understand why parents are being so weird about this. We're just kids. And I was like, yeah, man, but in 2 years from now, or maybe 2 minutes, if I let you sleep in the same bed with her, you're going to find out real quick. Trust me. When it happens, there's no turning back.
None whatsoever. Good job on you, Catch. I was being a dad yesterday, but mine was the more simplistic, just practices and games ranging from San Antonio to here. But before one of the first games, though, I did come up with, I called it the panic meter. And
I like it.
I wanted to Catch, the one thing that doing the show, and it really kind of came from somebody posted something on Orange Bloods over I think it was like Friday or something. It was after the War Room. And someone had said something to the effect of, I find it hard to believe that Christian Clark is ahead of CJ Baxter in his recovery, because that's why I said it's something in the War Room. 2 different injuries, right? And then I've posted that the picture of Christian Clark doing the squats. And at that point, it hit me, Catch. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes we just take for granted that everybody reads every single thing of what we write and consumes every single item, let's say, on this YouTube channel. So I decided to let me just recap everything I've reported from January until today, and then let me put in a common perspective, which is now let me put it on my panic meter based off of what we know as of today, right? I mean, we're not being silly, right? And saying, oh, okay, well, the season started. But for the most part, it's just we know the names. It's just a matter of who's going to get to certain spots. So I actually took the time out, Catch, to before the show, kind of make some captions. And if you want to go position by position, we can do it like this. And I got all of them ready. So I'll toss it back to you. And we start with quarterbacks. And by the way, scale of 1 to 10. And I never understand why 10 has to be the highest. Like, I don't understand why you have to tell people 10's the highest. But nonetheless.
You need to. You have to.
You have to, because some people are like, is 10 the highest? But and like, no, it should be the highest because 10 is higher than 9. But nonetheless, and 10's higher than 1. I'll flip with you and I'll let you narrate it from here. Let's start with quarterbacks.
Doesn't feel like a position that anybody's worried about. It's not a position where they return a season star. They're not returning an All-American. They're not even returning Quinn Ewers in terms of experience and lived experience. And so there's a little bit of the unknown that Arch still has so much to do. But in terms of worrying at the position, it's pretty low. It can't be a 1, because a 1 would be the way you would feel if Vince Young was coming back after winning the Rose Bowl MVP, right? 1 has to be reserved for your returning god at quarterback, or Bijan and Roshan at running back a few years ago. And you're just like, hey, man, we may have some problems, but we got running back taken care of, which will be an interesting conversation point here in just a second. I'm like at a 2. There's no worry about the starter. There's not even really a real conversation about, I think, the backup, although maybe KJ Lacey will give Trey Owens a run for his money, but it feels like the pecking order, at least for now, is kind of established. Manning's the starter. I think he's going to be really good. If someone wanted to nitpick me and say a 2 is still too low because of the uncertainty of his inexperience, I don't know that I would argue with them. I think in general, as we begin the process, quarterback just feels low. They're not looking to address quarterback in the portal. I know that. And I think almost all these other positions that we're going to talk about, there will at least be some consideration, or some has already been given to beefing up that side of the ball. And quarterback's not one of those positions.
Yeah. Catch, as you talk it out, I start to rethink my number because I think I put it at a 1. But you know what? But
I know why you would have done that, right? You're not thinking about it at all.
Not at all. Now, here's the thing that I probably should factor in, but you don't want to put like bad mojo out there. It's the whole catch. At the end of the day, we haven't seen a Texas quarterback start in like 12 games. And it seems like forever. There's always some sort of hiccup that happens from an injury perspective. And I think I've outlined this for years, but, we just don't see guys go from week 1 and now we're talking week 17, And so the only thing I probably should have factored in a little bit would be, what's the backup situation look like? And how do I feel? What do I really know about Trey Owens? What do I really know about KJ Lacey? I know what people say, but you and I both know when the bullets start flying, it's a totally, totally different thing, right? And so probably, while I wrote down 1, I probably should increase it. If I factor in the backup thing, as we talk about now, I probably would increase it to at least a 3.
I think a 3 is right, doesn't it? 5 feels whoa. But like there needs to be some.
Yes. Like just off of and look, I think Arch is going to be fantastic as a starter at some point. But I cannot go in here just blindly and think this year he's going to throw for 4,000 yards, 45 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and wins the Heisman. Like, I have to factor in catch. The only reason that people think he's going to be flawless is because the name that's on the back of the jersey.
That's so myopic to think that, because you look, the one thing I always said about Quinn early in his career was like, hey man, like Father Time doesn't get cheated. The growth and like development process of quarterbacks, it's a real thing. He still needs to make his first career. Someone asked me this weekend if I was buy or sell Texas by 10 plus on August 31st. And I was like,
Sir,
what are we doing, guys?
Sir, ... I remember because I laughed out loud.
I'm like, guys, are we there? So yeah, I don't change my thoughts. Like, the question will be, what's Arch's growth? What does it look like? You know, we know what it looked like for Quinn, and I think it was completely normal that late in the season we'd still be getting to games in Stillwater, and there was still like a little bit of a not quite ready for prime timeness about it all. Texas can ill afford that with Arch, but there will be some of that. He will have a stinker at some point, because that's what happens with young quarterbacks. It happened to Peyton. It happened to Eli. Like, Arch isn't going to be able to completely cheat the process. What you hope is that, you know, when a Clemson was going through this with Trevor Lawrence, and he was mostly very, very good as a young quarterback, but every once in a while he's still a freshman or still a young player. Those teams were good enough. Alabama, Georgia. Well, Georgia really hasn't had that guy yet, but all of these schools that have had dynamic young quarterbacks have been good enough to overcome that. And I think, boy, if you're Texas, there's only a handful of games on the schedule where if Arch wasn't good, there'd be a real uh-oh moment. And it's, you know, I think probably people shouldn't get too carried away with undefeated predictions. You need to know that, you know, Arch's big year is probably 2026, and that at some point this year there will be a few growing pains, and don't freak out when it happens. It's literally like it's just part of life as a quarterback. The question is, can they overcome that with the quality of the roster and the team and still accomplish their goals? I think so, but, you know, I certainly will bake in a loss or two this season, and at some point it'll probably because Arch has a game that they're not quite able to overcome, and he'll be better for having gone through that eventually.
That brings us to the next one, and this is the more interesting one, Catch, right? The running back situation. I'll start. I put mine at a 7 for the concern factor. And, you know, there's a thing that, sure, Quintravian Wiesner was able to get to 1,000 yards. It took a lot of games for that to happen. If we're just, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it took it wasn't in 12 games that he got to 1,000. I feel like the myth of CJ Baxter has probably been more greater than the reality of what we've seen, because I don't know what Texas really has with CJ Baxter, because all I know is, and when he was running, he was there, he was somewhat effective, but then Jonathan Brooks takes over, and then you're like, oh, snap. Well, that's what the running back position is supposed to look like. You got Christian Clark coming off of an injury. I know you loved him coming out of high school. You got some other young guys that are in there, but Catch, that run game was not as effective as it could have been or should have been last season. And I just entered this year saying, somebody will probably emerge, but who it is, I can't tell you. And I do go into that position thinking I do have a lot of concern.
I'm probably at a 7. I don't know quite how to quantify it, right? I know how to talk it out. And then I heard you just do it. And I was like, 7's probably right. Like, I don't want to, I'm not screaming fire in a crowded theater. But Jaden Blue was their best game breaker a year ago. Like, that's just undeniable. And when they were at their best at the running back position, it's when Blue was not in one of his funks. I mean, we don't have to relitigate his season a year ago, but we know that it was a little up and down. But when it was up, like that's when Texas was their most dynamic at that position. Well, they've lost him and they've not replaced that skill set. So they go into the spring with 4 healthy running backs. I wrote about this in my 10 thoughts because I hadn't really thought about it, but Ricky Stewart Jr. and James Simon, the only 2 guys that are in front of the true freshmen taking snaps this spring are Trey Wisner and Jarrett Gibson. That's it. And I think Trey Wisner I think he's an NFL player. I think he's going to be a guy that collects checks. So I think he's really good. But he's not a first round pick. Nobody would suggest that. And at that position, that's not even, it can't be controversial. Is he a day 2 pick? He had almost half of his games last season. He was below 3.8 yards per carry in a game. So he is, while we all pointed to Blue and said, man, what an up and down year he had. I don't think we think of Wisner quite like that because he ended up being the lead running back, because he gets 1,000 yards, because he runs so hard. But I don't know that he's a upper tier NFL draft prospect. And that's kind of the bar around here. What they've had for the last half decade up until last year, and look, Blue may still end up going pretty high. I've seen some mocks that have had Blue in the 3rd round. As crazy as that kind of sounds to me, but speed is speed. They lack game breakers. I'm not quite sure I know what Wisner is fully. Is he really, really good, or is he really good? And if he's just really good, does that mean he's definitely the starter for the next 3 years, the next 2 years? And if he's not, who starts over him? And what? I don't know what. So I have way more questions than answers. But the one thing I feel like I know is this group doesn't have a game changer. They don't have anybody, at least this spring, that you can give the ball to anywhere on the field and it scares the crap out of opposing defenses. It's not what Wisner is. Definitely not what Gibson is. It's not really what Simon is. It remains to be seen if Stewart can be that kind of a guy. But, upon his departure, Tashard Choice did not leave this group as stacked as I think Texas fans felt like Tashard Choice was doing. It's a position that has some guys on it. It's a position that's had some bad luck because of the injuries, but it's definitely a position that's at a 7 going into the spring in terms of, I think, the worry meter. I don't know that what they have can win you a conference championship if your conference is the SEC. I don't know if it can win you a national championship. And it's one of the reasons why I think going into the spring after football is over, I think they're going to address the running back position in some shape, form, or fashion in the portal. And I think this spring will tell them that is a need that they can't take the risk that Baxter or Christian Clark might be the answers coming off of serious injuries. They need to be a little more proactive than that.
Yeah. I mean, Catch, at the end of the day, and I don't say this, let's crap on the guy because he's not here. But at the end of the day, Catch, Texas rushing offense ranked 10th in the SEC last season. It was the 10th ranked rushing offense in the SEC last season, 71st in the country. Okay. And so at the end of the day, when we say this run game was not dynamic last year, as dynamic as it could be, well, it wasn't. And the guys that Tashard Choice was really able to hang his hat on were Bijan, Roschon, Jonathan Brooks. None of those guys he recruited.
Not in Blue wasn't even his guy.
In Blue wasn't either. So I mean, none of these guys. So these were guys that recruited before him that would. I mean, come on, Bijan was.
Tom Herman did a great job at running back and D tackle, as it turns out. We're going into year 5 of Sark, and we're still talking about guys that Herman delivered that were producers. I think, I'm not saying Tom Herman deserves. Well, they didn't win anything last year, so they don't get a ring. But, if this were the Premier League, you might need to send him a winner's medal. Like, he did help. He did. Stan Drayton, he helped too. I think it's a reminder that there's always work to do. That, even though Texas had the #1 recruiting class in the country, and even though their super blue chip numbers in terms of elite prospects across the board are as high as almost any school in the country, not named Ohio State or Georgia, and they're just behind them. There's still work to do. There's still ways that you can improve the roster. And I think the Baxter injury is, I think the coaching staff would tell you that's our guy. That's the guy we recruited to be the guy. And that his injury, even though he didn't do that as a freshman, I think they think he was going to be that kind of a player. I don't think just having one guy at that position is enough, and you got to recruit better than that. But I think they would hang their hat on, look, we think we've got a day 2 NFL player in Baxter, and that the injury is the injury, and who knows if we'll ever get that kind of performance out of him. But, if there will be positions where it's like, look, if there is an injury, look, offensive line is one of them, right? There are guys that if everything's cool, they'll be okay. Nothing happens to Trevor Gooseby all season long. Texas got left tackle pretty much on lockdown. They'll be good. Probably have a high-level NFL draft prospect in that spot. But, they're an injury away from suddenly we look at that position in the entire offensive line and go, ugh, what do we have here? And I think running back has experienced that with Baxter, and you just got to be able to recruit and produce players. And it's why I think they'll go into the portal. And, I don't think it's an accident that if you look at what Chad Scott left behind at West Virginia in terms of returning running back talent, Texas had a need when Tashard Choice made the move. There's a very good chance that Jahmyr Gibbs would have come with him. Mm-hmm. But they had Roschon and Bijan, and in the end, Jahmyr Gibbs didn't need to follow as much as he loved Tashard Choice. And he gives Tashard Choice. And look, they're reunited in Detroit.
Correct. Yes.
When I tell you that Jahmyr Gibbs would have likely have been a Longhorn had that had happened, I really believe that. Well, I think you look at the West Virginia situation, before Scott took that job, the Texas job, his running backs were given his presence on the roster a lot of credit for why they didn't take more NIL money that might have been available elsewhere. But now that he's gone, they're going through spring football. I'm sure they're making a relationship with the new guy. But you have to think that a phone call will be made, and that, if the NIL money is right and they potentially get to reunite with their former coach, who they said they came back for, just something to keep an eye on. I think Texas will be looking for running backs, but sometimes the most obvious and smartest answer is the easiest answer. And I think looking at the white kid at West Virginia is probably a pretty good place to start. He averaged 5.8 yards per carry a year ago. He's got some dynamic ability inside of him that would help replace Blue. So, and if you added a guy like that to the mix, a proven commodity with some burst and some, I think it would only take one guy added to the mix to drop this 7 to a 5. What about you? If they go out in the portal and bring in a guy that's got real deal experience and a profile that would scream, yeah, he fits what this offense is looking for. I'm not talking All-American or even All-Conference, but a guy with some juice who's proven. What does that do for you on your worry?
It probably more down to a 5, probably catch. But when I think about right now, do I think there's a running back on this roster that can rush for over 100 yards against Ohio State in the season opener? Yeah, right? So you've got to have something that I feel like you've got some sort of run threat. And so
I'm scared to death about the run game in Columbus. There's no part of me that thinks they show up in Columbus with an offensive line that, and we'll get to them in a second, but the running game in general for me is at 8.
Yeah,
as a worry.
Yes, yeah, on our panic meter, and you're not understanding because I've got it as a 7 as well.
But I'm saying that's if we combine running back, offensive line, and tight end together.
Yeah.
I think pass protection, I'm not really worried about. Like Kyle Flood will teach those guys to pass protect. But I don't know that those dudes they just had their best offensive line in half a generation or more last year. You got to go back to 2006, and I know we're a little ahead of ourselves, but just in the running game component, again, not screaming fire in a crowded theater, but the bar now is to get to a national semifinal and then beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Not making the playoffs.
No.
Not making the SEC champ. The bar is so high that you'll forgive us if it seems like our concern numbers are high because we're talking about what has to exist in order for this team to win a national championship. And ultimately what existed a year ago wasn't good enough. It wasn't. So it's not as good as it was a year ago. And we know that a year ago it wasn't quite good enough. So that's kind of where we are. Hey, Anwar, as you go into wide receivers, I need like 30 seconds, okay? So I'm going to leave the screen, get us started on wide receivers, and I'll be right back.
So the wide receiver thing is kind of interesting because last year we saw Sark basically attack the portal as we've seen him over the past couple of years, just saying like we are attacking the portal. And going into last season, or at least before last season, one of the things Sark was and the staff was kind of adamant about was, you know what, we don't have a ton of experience at that position. So we're going to go out and we're going to add in a bunch of guys. You didn't see that in this offseason. Now, I'm still convinced once we get out of spring that they will go ahead and at least add in one guy. But for right now, what you see is kind of going to be what you get. You're going to have your Ryan Wingos. You're going to have, and then you're going to have a bunch of, you're going to have DeAndre Moore, but DeAndre Moore is limited because of the injury. You're going to have JB French as a freshman. You're going to have Dalen McCutcheon as a freshman. Parker Livingstone is kind of I don't know what Parker is. Is this a second or third year on there? I got to look him up. You've got Michael Terry. And so you've got receivers, but again, now it goes to, are you confident with the guys that they have and you feel good? And then we're at the point where Chris Jackson is just reloading, or are you saying, you know what, they need some more playmakers and I don't care, but hey, Sark, last year you said you needed proven guys. Well, this year you still need some proven guys. So we got to get to the panic meter on that portion, Catch.
I'm probably like at a 5 with wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. It's down. It's not quarterback, but it's not running back, tight end, or offensive line either. Here's the thing, and this is the elephant in the room on this discussion, in my opinion. I think Texas got effed in the early portal session because their season was still going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the portal activity was happening in December. And Texas brought in a couple of big name guys, including they bring in Singleton from Georgia. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't that they didn't try, but I never heard that they really made a big push. And one of the reasons why was to bring in, let's say, a Singleton from Georgia Tech. Every guy on the Texas roster, it would have cost $1 million to get that guy.
Yeah.
It just would have. That guy got paid. That is the new market. But what Texas knew was that all of its players were watching. And they knew that when the season was over, they were going to have dozens of interviews with players about their NIL deals and retention. And I think they were terrified to give some on a team that was playing for a national championship to bring in guys through the portal before the season was over and to basically scream, We paid $1 million to get this guy's making $1 million. And nobody on the current team was making really more than 700-ish, 750-ish. That was kind of the cap. Every guy on the roster would have been like, yeah, baby. If that dude's getting $1 million and he played on a 3-9 team a year ago and wasn't even all Big Ten, what am I worth? And so Texas did not go into the portal and get Isaiah Bond or Adonai Mitchell or even a Trey Moore like it did a year ago. The only guys they dabbled with really early in the portal were kind of mid-tier pieces. Brad Spence, a guy that got paid, but a guy that didn't need earth-shattering money to do so. The market wasn't quite like that. I think as they go into the portal in this next window, they've secured all their guys. They did. But all those conversations happened after the last portal. So all that, I think I say all of this. If there's a way for Texas to go get a game changer at wide receiver, collusion, tampering. If there's a way to make sure that a big time guy enters the portal, I think Texas will be active. I think they will. I think I will have this later in the week. Like we've had people connected to family members of wide receivers who said, oh yeah, no, they've told us they're going to go into the portal. Now, who that is, what that is, we don't know. But I do think there's a sense that inside the belly of the beast, the wide receivers on campus know the dynamics will change. So you better take advantage of your opportunity in the spring to make some hay, because Texas will be they will go get a starter, I think, at least one. I think they feel good about Wingo. I think they feel good about DeAndre Moore when he's healthy. I don't think they're going to rely on true freshman Jamie French in year one to hold it down. Ryan Wingo wasn't good enough for that a year ago. Really, he wasn't, even if he was blind and they didn't know it. But even Jonte Cook 2 seasons before, it was too much for him.
Yeah.
So I think they'll look at Jamie French and say, we think this guy's going to be an absolute star for us, just like Ryan Wingo. But we're trying to win a national championship, and we don't have a guy that's ever truly carried a passing game in a big game. That's not what DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo have been. But it is what Isaiah Bond and Adonai Mitchell had previously been. It's what Silas Bolden had been. They will get a starter a starter level wide receiver in the portal when it's all said and done. It's why I'm kind of at a 5 instead of anything higher than that. I like the talent they have, full of young talent, and I think help will be on the way.
Well, the other thing too, Catch, when you mention Texas kind of getting screwed in transfer portal window, I looked it up, and so the transfer portal window last year it opened on December the 9th and closed on December the 28th. You know what Texas was doing on December 21st? They were playing against Clemson. Yep. You know what they were doing on January 1st? They were playing against Arizona State. You can't have, as your team is starting to get ready for playoff runs, bringing in a guy who's worth $1 million and have that in your locker room.
They were so worried about disruption.
Because they know because everybody's looking for the money. But now all of a sudden, first of all, you just told me that I'm probably out, right? So now if I'm whoever, if I'm Parker Livingstone, if I'm anybody else on this roster, I'm like, shit, well, hell, let me jump in the portal because this guy just committed on, December 22nd. December
you're just telling me I got no chance ever.
Correct. So I'm out. I'm 100% like I'm good on that one, right? And so you gotta be real careful with that, and you still got incoming kids that you want to get on campus on board. So the how the playoffs have gone and it's run into December really kind of makes it difficult if you want to keep cohesion on your roster, like because these guys know. Because to your point, when the season was over, it was like. That Georgia ended the next day. Everybody's like, "Okay, where's my money?" and so,
look, you can't give Eric Singleton 1.2 and then expect Colin Simmons or Anthony Hill to not look at that and go, okay, well, I know what the cap previously has been because I've been at the top of it. But if the new cap is something completely different, and this dude who contributed nothing to our Final Four success is getting 1.2, I got to be worth $2 million.
And do you really? And am I really going to bust my ass for you when I'm already making 400 or something right now on the rookie deal, and you just brought in this guy here? You're like, oh, so you want me bust my ass in practice this week while this guy's getting ready to collect a check? Like, that's not the way you motivate a team.
No, and look, this also goes to the Sark really asks a lot of himself in December, and what was asked of Sark and Ryan Day and a few of the coaches this year has never been asked of college head coaches ever. So it's not even like Nick Saban can be like, oh, I remember. No, you don't, Nick. No, you don't. Because you never actually had to quite deal with the same thing that they had to deal with. The portal restriction rules, like the way that they were, they're a little tightened, which if you're in, so, you know, I just think that when people look at the portal and go, what did Texas do in the portal? And why did they not spend more money? And why are we waiting so late to answer some of these questions? You know, it's complicated. The sport is more complicated than it's ever been before. And I think Texas dealt with those complications the best way that they could. And I think now going into the spring, they will feel more freedom than they were able to feel in December for a myriad of reasons, which we've kind of outlined. But I do think if you're a Texas fan and your worry meter at wide receivers a 5 or higher, you can rest easy. I don't know who it's going to be, but trust me, there is anticipation inside the building, not amongst coaches. I mean, I'm talking about the players at this point at that position are expecting that a transfer will come in. And I think that they'll all know, hey, man, you know what I do have that guy won't have? 15 practices to put a marker down and say, coach, don't forget about me. But if those 15 practices have gone by and you haven't done that, the coaches can look and say, hey, man, we didn't have more. We got freshmen taking first-team reps. I don't even know who the hell's taking the first-team reps at the slot position completely. Everybody's going to get a chance this spring. If you don't put a marker down, the coaches will at that point be, well, because a year ago, Bond and Golden were on campus for the spring. So they jumped in front of people. And I know you'll remember this, they didn't even put Isaiah Bond in the starting lineup in the spring for a while. He was running with the twos.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to step on anybody's toes and just, you know, automatically put guys like a Jonte Cook suddenly running behind a guy. There are dynamics that they've got to protect. I think the good news about the way that things unfolded is they'll be able to give their young guys a full audition. Nobody that steps up can complain. And, you know, I think it'll give them a real idea of what do we really need. And is it one guy or is it two guys? A year ago, they took 3. And I thought they had more returning guys coming back, more stuff than they do this year. So I don't know. I'm fascinated to see what we hear reported. I know this. A year ago, you were the only one in the market that I saw report Quinn's got a thing with Matthew Golden, and like it's unexplainable. It just is. Those two guys have a good connection. File that away. At the time, I was like, that's really interesting. And most people were like, no big deal. And as it turned out, it turns out to be really, really important. And it was the first sign that we should have taken that, hey, man, I don't know how it's all going to shake out, but Matthew Golden is going to be part of it. I think I'll listen for the same thing. If you report early in camp or 2 weeks into camp, hey, man, Arch and Parker Livingstone got a little something, like there's just a chemistry there. I'm going to file that away, and I'm going to assume when we get to the fall, that's going to matter because it certainly did a year ago.
I think you and I might be in unison on this one, Catch. Because when it comes to tight ends, so Texas goes from Jatavian Sanders, cool. And then they are able to fall into Gunnar Helm right after that. Cool, right? It's like, all right, well, not much of a drop-off as far as production or productivity is concerned. You feel pretty good. Now, Catch, it's almost like we're in this abyss where you've got Jordan Washington. We're still talking about Will Randall and Spencer.
No, we're not. No, we're not. Nobody's talking about those dudes.
Okay, no. All right. Let me give you the name.
Jordan, that's the problem.
That's true.
It's just Jordan Washington, and then your fingers are crossed that the freshmen come in, but the best freshman doesn't show up until the fall or the summer.
Yeah, so now that's a big that for me. I probably should have put it at a higher concern level, but there's two things about it. There is the pass catching thing, right? But we know tight ends have to do more than that. And I'm sorry.
And Texas plays two
at
the same time 40+% of the time since Sark has been here. They play two tight ends all the time.
And I want one from a run blocking thing, but you know what? I also want to make sure my quarterback doesn't get killed. And that quarterback's name is Arch Manning. And they've gone into the portal, Catch, and tried to get tight ends. That actually has not. I don't think that's worked out for them once. If we're just being quite honest, and maybe it's just Bama tight ends, and maybe that's just the curse here.
It is, I think, just Bama tight ends, like because those have been the only guys, right?
Yeah, I think it was just only two, right?
Well, look, they tried to take that Purdue guy, but they couldn't. And he goes to Ohio State, but Ohio State's dynamics in NIL are slightly different. They splurged in the portal a year ago, and everybody on that team knows that it's not socialism in their football department, that there's not an arbitrary number that they've – because Texas kind of decided we're not going above this, and everybody's head can hit against that, but we're not going above that, and everybody kind of knew the deal. Ohio State was a little more free. Like, they got guys that they got in the portal by going out and spending, and everybody on the roster knew they're doing it to go for a title. So when they were the ones that offer the big NIL deal to the Purdue tight end, they didn't have the same dynamics in their locker room that Texas did. And I think Texas would have loved to have given that kid a big NIL offer, but we don't need to relitigate everything that we just talked about. There were reasons why they didn't. I don't know that they're going to get another chance. I'm Billy Bob in Varsity Blues right now. I give it a 10. 10. It's a 10 for me. They want to play multiple guys on the field a lot, and the only guy they have is wildly unproven. They think he's going to be good, but that doesn't mean anything. He's a baby. He's a baby. He's a baby who wasn't as highly recruited as Jatavian Sanders, but will be asked to perform at higher levels than Sanders did because there's nobody else. Like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. You can't play a ton of 12 personnel and then only have one talented but inexperienced tight end on your roster and then some Jags. And then like Nick Townsend gets here in the summer. But what are you asking of him? He won't even have practice by the time he gets here. So they got to go get somebody. They need at the very least go find another Juan Davis because Juan Davis played a lot last season. Juan Davis caught the first ball against Ohio State in the national semifinal. I think he got multiple catches in that game. They don't even have Juan Davis. And Juan Davis is just okay. But he was a good, solid contributor. That is not Will Randall. That is not Spencer Shannon. That is not anybody else. That is a position that could rank among the bottom 5 in the SEC going into this season. It is just not loaded at all. Woosah. 10.
Boy, because what's going to be scary when we get to the end. We're going to have probably tight ends and special teams ranked pretty high, and that will be pointing a few fingers at Jeff Banks. uncomfortable as it is, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's go this one here, Catch. This is the fascinating one. Offensive line. Look at you as you hang your head low as we get ready to have this conversation. I read, listen, so for clarity, I always read your 10 thoughts. So I usually read it like in the middle of the night because I just wake up and I just read it.
That's the best time to consume 9,000 words.
Yeah, like I wake up, I'm old. I go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It's like 3:30. I'm like, I'm up for about another hour. So let me just read it. And I read what you said as relates to I'll let you say what you said about Nick Brooks and everything as associated with that. Because this one's so interesting. This is Texas once again saying we're just going to rely on our development of guys, but you do have some skepticism, though.
Well, look, I think Trevor Gooseby is going to be an all SEC caliber player. By the way, Barbs, we see your super chat. We'll get to that in just a second.
Good. By the way, I can't get back to the chat for some reason. Oh, here it is. Now I can. Okay, now I can. Perfect. I'll highlight that.
I've got major questions in the interior of that offensive line. When I hear the Nick Brooks hype, we're all hearing it. Literally, we're all hearing it. He's a buzz name. It's exciting. I don't know what it means for this season because he's an offensive lineman, and I don't know. I don't think he's Kelvin Banks. So I don't know what I do think maybe he's in play at right tackle, or maybe if he's so good, maybe he could be part of the answer at guard. But I don't know, man. I think more than anything, hearing the Nick Brooks hype is a reminder that they don't talk about any of these other dudes. Like, let me pull up the scholarship board. So, because I forget the names at this point, because they don't ever play and nobody ever talks about them. But, if we go here are the offensive tackles on campus, in order from oldest to youngest. Malik Agbo, that dude's transferred. I feel like we can say that. That's got to happen eventually. He literally, unless they tell him we think you can play tight end, and he goes back to being the jumbo tight end and helps out there, he doesn't feel like he's in the mix at all. Andre Kojo, Jaden Chapman, these are guys going into their third seasons. I feel like none of those guys have ever been spoken of once the way Nick Brooks has been spoken about in the first 15 minutes he's been on campus. So when I hear Nick Brooks, the hype train, I think to myself, these other dudes just must suck because they have never once received any hype. And then inside of that, you've got Brandon Baker, who's a little bit of a we'll see. I think he's going to be okay, but we'll see. And then I love Gooseby. And then we go to guards. Cole Hudson. So you got DJ Campbell, rock solid. Cole Hudson has not been good. I'm sorry. He's not. He's been the worst graded offensive lineman on 3 consecutive Texas teams. Has to be a record. Has to be. And they're counting on him being a starter at this point. The Neto Yamuzalo, here's the thing. If he had really been that good a year ago, wouldn't they have been playing him ahead of Cole Hudson? We know what Cole Hudson looks like. We don't really know about Neto because they didn't play him. But if they really thought Neto was about to find the light switch and become an NFL-level player, wouldn't they have played him ahead of some guys that Cole Hudson does not look like an NFL-level player to me. So, I don't know. If it was me, if Kyle Flood could have, I would have gone. And look, maybe what he needs is the spring to see all of these guys in person. But I think they need. I think it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world if. I guess it comes down to Brandon. They got to get at least one guy interior. They have to. They got to bulk up. That group is not good enough to win a national championship. It's not. They got to get at least one, and I could make a case that when the portal opens up in the spring, if they could find 2 starting offensive line level, because the backup talent's not good either. It is. This will be. We're back to 2022, where I think Kyle Flood has to do an exceptional job of offensive line coaching this year, because I don't see. You had an offensive line that was the best in the school since 2006, a year ago, and ultimately against the likes of Ohio State, they weren't good enough. Like, as high of a bar as that group set a year ago, and they were Joe Moore Offensive Line of the Year finalists. They didn't win the award. They were close, but we know that against Ohio State, they weren't good enough. The offensive line this year is a major step back on paper from where it was a year ago in every way. So I think they've got, to me, offensive line is, but trust me, when we get to defense, I don't have a lot of worries, actually. I got them all over the place on offense, except weirdly the one position where they're really inexperienced, and yet I'm comfortable with the 16 guy.
You know, it's an interesting catch, and I know we'll get to the super chat in a second. In hindsight, I know you talk about that Ohio State game. In hindsight, did we not make enough out of Cam Williams starting as an injured player, and as opposed to just throwing in Gooseby at right tackle? Like, in hindsight,
yes.
should we have said, you know what, that was kind of a little bit of an error on the staff to start a guy that we clearly saw was injured, clearly he was struggling, and at the end of the day, we're not going to put it all on him, but he does give up the game-ending play, right? And at that point, do you say whatever percentage of Cam could not have been better than 100% of Gooseby? And that is a huge error, or was one.
Yeah. I think they looked at Cam and they felt like, if we don't get him on the field, we're never going to get him again. Like, they knew he was going pro. And so I think there was a little bit of the Isaiah Bond factor, where it was like, look, if we don't get you back on the field now, why are you even here? Bond was like, I got to be ready for the draft. So I'm not hurting my ankle again. Sorry, I already did that. I re-injured it once. And I think it left a bad taste. And I think Cam Williams' ideology was different. He was like, I only might have 1 or 2 games left in my career. I want to get back on the field. So I think the combination of his thirst to play, along with, I think they probably thought, when he's healthy, he's our guy. He's so good. But yeah, in retrospect, Trevor Gooseby's really good. He is. He graded out really high in every game that they leaned on him in. And, you know, there's a world out there that did, in an alternative universe, there's a world out there where maybe he even plays a couple of more times in a starting capacity. And then maybe he would have felt different. You know, 2 more starts, and maybe it's funny. You and I won't talk about it, but there's a scenario that could have unfolded where Gooseby plays a couple of more times, and maybe they're not rushing guys back. Maybe guys are dinged up, and maybe if he gets those extra games in, by the time they get to that Georgia game, they would have felt more comfortable. I think maybe they were maybe because it was Ohio State, and maybe they just didn't believe in Gooseby enough yet. But yeah, man, in retrospect, you couldn't do worse than being a freaking turnstile on the biggest play of the season. And I don't blame Cam for that. He's playing hurt.
Yeah.
And he's going up against one of the best guys at that position in college football. And that guy's going to be drafted. He's going to be a second-day NFL draft pick. He's really good. And when you're hurt and you're playing against that guy, I think nobody could be shocked that happened.
Kedge, do you want to do this? Do you want to knock out the super chat and maybe we save defense for another show? Because we're coming up on an hour.
Probably, but I honestly feel like my defense I can do in 5 minutes.
You sure? Because we can, or we can save it for another week.
Look, I think we can wipe out defense quickly.
Okay, all right. I just didn't want you to go, till another hour, and then all of a sudden,
no.
You're like, all right.
The offense is where all the help is needed.
Okay.
Defense we're going to go through in 10 minutes.
All right. You want to knock out the super chat real quick? Let's do that.
Do you have it in front of you, or do I need to scroll up?
I
Here, I got it.
Okay.
Barbs for $5. Thank you, Barbs. We do appreciate it. So what is the holdup on the tight end prospects? Arch plus Texas plus NIL equals nada. Juan Davis should not be the bar. Well, Juan Davis isn't the bar. Jatavian Sanders and Gunnar Helm are the bar, but you got to have good backups. What's the real deal? It's hard to find good tight ends, Barbs. In recruiting, there are unicorns. Texas did get a guy, Nick Townsend, that they think is going to be a unicorn, but of all of the freshman class that signed in December, he's one of only 5 guys that didn't arrive early. It just kind of is what it is. Were he here in the spring, I think that would have helped considerably. The combination of Townsend and Amari Winston gave Texas a 1-2 punch at tight end, and that doesn't include Michael Terry, who some people thought could give you some H-back help, and who knows, maybe they'll get through the spring and feel like, what he might be able to do, give us some reps in a Jordan Washington kind of a way. He can be kind of a big receiver. They weren't able to spend big bucks in NIL because of the dynamics that we discussed earlier. It's a lot of stuff. And they just haven't done a good job recruiting that position. Ultimately, when you look at what's on campus right now, they don't have a senior. They don't have a junior on the roster. They've got 3 sophomores. Spencer Shannon and Will Randall are going into their 3rd year, sophomore year. Neither of them have lettered. I don't know if either of them have even played in a game. And then you've got Jordan Washington, and then that's it. And then the incoming freshman. So losing Amari Niblack hurt, not because they thought he was going to be a star or even the starter, but he gave them a guy they know they could play. They lack those guys. And that's the deal. It's not much more complicated than that. It's a lot of stuff. It's not any one thing, but the bottom line is the bottom line.
All right, Catch, let's knock out defense. Let's go to the interior of the defensive line, Catch. You got some transfers here, some incoming guys. In Kenny Baker, you trust?
Yeah, they've already done so much that I'm like at a 4.
Yeah. I'm low on them. I look, at the end of the day, Catch, and I know when we sometimes just say no disrespect, and that's when the disrespect is coming. But
the most disrespect normally comes right after somebody says no disrespect.
Yes, right. But no disrespect. Kenny Baker was able to get the most out of Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins than any coach has been able to do. Obviously, we're talking about like a Bo Davis. And those were guys that I heard so many questions about Alfred Collins for years. Vernon Broughton was a guy that Catch in the spring, he decides to get married. And people are like, is this guy even dedicated to football? Like,
they thought that meant he was going to the portal.
Yeah, like they thought like this guy didn't even love football. Like, that's not even his thing. At the end of the day, those guys end up being key contributors on a really outstanding defensive line. So I'm kind of at the point that whatever they throw in there is probably going to go well. But my concern level is below a 5 with them. Edge guys, Catch?
Mine isn't that low. I know that yours was a little higher. I'm probably at a 4. I think Colin Simmons is going to be a superstar. I think Ethan Burke is going to be a badass. You know that Trey Moore can give you some reps there as run. I really think Zena Umuzalo has a chance to be a bit of a breakout guy this spring. I think the only reason why he doesn't get talked about more is everybody knows he'll never start above Colin Simmons. So it's hard to get excited about a guy that's not as good as the other guy, but I think he's going to be really good. If Vassett comes along with Lance Jackson, I think they got wealthy people problems when you've got Colin Simmons and a guy like Ethan Burke as your 2 starters. Yeah. And, we can nitpick and say they need to be better because Texas has been deeper. And I don't know, look at Ethan Burke and say he's an upgrade over Baron Sorrell at all. But I think, I think he's a really good player. I think whenever Sorrell came out and Ethan Burke goes into games, I don't think anybody ever goes, oh no, not Ethan Burke. I think he's a really good player. So my concern levels, plus Brad Spence is a rusher. He had 5.5 sacks last year for Arkansas as a young player. I don't fully know how Texas is going to use him, but I could see him also being a guy that in pass rush situation is used as an extra edge guy off the edge. He has that skill set. So I think they've got a lot of parts, and I don't find myself really worried about that at all. So a 4, really with a tip of the cap to Barron Sorrell, and knowing that maybe they haven't fully replaced that.
Yeah, and that was at a 3. So I think you and I were pretty close to, splitting hairs at that point. Linebackers is interesting because, look, you got Anthony Hill, of course. Trey Moore is moved over to linebacker in the offseason. You already got Leona LaFau that's there as well. Got some other guys. But
Anthony Smith,
Anthony Smith as well. So your thoughts on the linebacker position? Where's your panic meter at, Catch, on the linebackers?
It probably a 2.
Yeah.
I mean, they returned everybody from last year except for David Benda. And the guy that they replaced with David Benda is better than Benda. Brad Spence is better than David Benda. So everybody that worked together. And now the issue is by the end of the year, Leon LaFau had kind of hit the wall. They asked a lot of him. And I think you start talking about, man, how many games they end up playing? 15, 16? I lost count.
It was a lot.
Because they played the SEC championship game and then 3 playoffs. They played 16 games. Wow. I think by the end, a guy like LaFau hit the wall. And I think that's understandable. But I think he'll be stronger. I think all those young guys that played a year ago, like I'm not worried about, again, not worried about linebacker. For everybody that heard my worries about offense, you need to know that I think Texas is going to be elite on defense again next year across the board. And I think it'll probably be the defense and a big dose of Arch Manning that carry this team to the playoffs. I don't know what I think beyond that, though.
It's interesting. Somebody asked you about, obviously you talk, there's Brandon Baker, not Brandon Baker, Nick Brooks hypes, and there's also Jalen Gilbo hype as well. And going into this offseason, I think somebody asked you about him being as good as Jahdae Barron. You sold on that, but I also, I think within the building, there's hopes that he can take the baton, because they still remember when all things were equal a couple of years ago, that Jalen Gilbo was the guy kind of ahead of Barron until he got injured. So they love him.
Well, I think he took Barron's job last spring. People forget. Barron wasn't moved to the outside right away. He was inside, and then Gilbo played so well that they very quickly last spring were like, you know what, full-time outside, because he was kind of doing both. And I think Gilbo's the best player on the Texas team that nobody ever talks about. So while I sell, can he be a top 15? Will he be a top 15 NFL pick in the Thorpe Award winner? I don't want to put that on him. Do I think he could be an NFL level second day guy? I think he's already that kind of a guy. I am shocked that Gilbo it wasn't like Gilbo got picked on ever last year. He held it down in the slot. And there's no game last year where we looked at it and went, oh, that's the game where they worked on Gilbo. He was excellent all year long, but he didn't have the big stats. I thought he was better last year at that position than Barron was the year before. Mm-hmm. But the secondary was so bad 2 years ago that everybody looked at Barron and went, you got to make more plays because nobody else is. I thought Gilbo was great. I thought Barron made all the plays, and so Gilbo didn't get the notoriety. I think he's excellent. And so I think, we were talking about first world rich people problems. Texas at corner has those because Gilbo's on the outside, Malik Muhammad, Kobe Black. You recruited Cade Phillips as they think Cade Phillips is as good as anybody in this recruiting class. That's what they think. He's here in the spring. That doesn't even include a guy like Warren Roberson, who you talked about, is like they like him. The question for Roberson, I always get that last name mixed up. Which one is which?
Roberson.
Yeah, it's always Roberson. But every once in a while you'll meet.
I do it. I mess.
You know what it is? It's Win versus Nguyen. And I went to my eye doctor last week, and her name is Win, but my wife was saying it was Nguyen. And even Dr. Wynn said, well, we do come across – it's Win. Yeah. There are people who say Nguyen, and that's how I feel about Roberson. There's And anyway, they're really good at corner. Like, I don't know how Wardell Mack and a guy like Santana Wilson, how those guys getting on the field. I think those guys are wildly talented. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think they've got at least 7 corners they feel comfortable playing. That does not include Ryan Niblett. I have no idea what the hell he's going to do. That doesn't even include Jelani McDonald playing in the nickel. So I think they're loaded at corner. I'm low at concern at corner.
By the way, Catch, when you said the Niblett thing, I feel like every spring there's a position change that everyone is excited about for like a 48-hour period. They always ask you about it. It usually means nothing when it's all said and done. Like usually when that position change happens, it's never usually for a good reason.
I think Niblett's going to transfer. And anybody that was like, "Whoa, Catch, don't." Nobody ranked Ryan Niblett higher than I did. I ranked Ryan Niblett as a super blue chip when a lot of people didn't. If he doesn't pan out, that's on me to some extent in terms of like I will view myself harshly for falling for the okie doke. I do that with any guy that I miss on, but Niblett hasn't hit yet. I don't know what the hell he's doing at nickel. How does he get on the field? Is he third team nickel behind? I don't know. Like, we expect McDonald to be the first team nickel. He can't be ahead of Warren Roberts? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like Ryan Niblett would have been the first team slot at wide receiver in the spring. He certainly would have been getting reps there, even if he wasn't the only guy with DeAndre Moore out. I'm kind of pissed about the Niblett move because I want Niblett to work out because of where I ranked him. Yes, I'm very selfish that way.
It's okay.
And I feel like this would have been the moment for him to have a breakout with DeAndre Moore not around. Ryan Niblett's biggest problem is that he came to Texas the same year in the same recruiting class as DeAndre Moore, and DeAndre Moore beat him out. Yeah. And they only play one slot.
Yeah. Right, let's get the last two out of here, Catch.
I'm at a 1.
Okay.
I'm at a 1.
All right.
They're good enough at safety that they can move Jelani McDonald to nickel and not flinch. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, this last but not least, showstopper, Catch. Special teams.
I mean, I'm a 10 at place kicker. They've already addressed punter. If they have numbers, man,
Where are you guys a kick returner? It wasn't like
I was going to say that's if they feel like they've got the scholarship availability to go get a return guy, I'm all for it. Hell, I'm all for one of the reasons why I would love if you're Texas to have a guy with like real deal Jim Nagy level scouting experience is I think you can, if they look, I feel like coaches talk out of both sides of their mouths on special teams. It's as important as offense or defense, is it? Because I don't always see a lot of urgency being treated with special teams. I love the idea, and I loved it a year ago, that if you've got a couple of extra scholarships and you've got the right scouting department in place, go find 3 badass coverage guys. Like, go find the best special teams guy in the Big 12 or in the ACC and give them like $500,000 or $400,000 and let them come and just be stars on your special teams. I don't know. There have been years when Texas on special teams, even under Sark, where you look at a guy like Keelan Robinson and you go, man, that dude is worth his scholarship just for the things that he gives you in the third phase. I don't see many guys on this roster that are so good at special teams in any area that you're like, oh, they're good. I think we say that at punter because they bring in the Utah transfer. So, okay. And I guess he and Michael Kern will battle it out. And do you know what I have heard? Can I get –
Sure.
As we wrap this up, I have a kicking game source
That's interesting.
And this kicking game source has been spot on. For instance, when Kern got hurt, this person was able to tell me this is the injury. And this is why they're not even listing him on the injury report, but like he's hurt. Just like, he had like a fracture or something like that. And I've been told, I haven't reported this. This is me. I'm bringing this to Orange Bloods Live and this show. And I've not even said this on Orange Bloods in a written content piece. But I've been told Michael Kern's poor punting average and style is Jeff Banks decided. That they care so much about there being no returns that they don't care if the kicks are short. So I got the sense there was some frustration last season from the punters who weren't allowed, and from their perspective, to like really let it rip. And what I was told is the new guy might come in and we might see his average be shorter than any average he's ever had at Utah, not because he's not kicking in thin air, but because from a strategy standpoint, Texas is going out of their way. They want no returns, and the trade-off is if it means that the punt game's not good in terms of, net average or just average per kick, they don't care. So I'm just telling you, I was told there were frustrations from people with connections to the punt game that thought we were too hard on Kern because they think Kern was just doing what he was coached, and that there's more inside of Michael Kern that we haven't seen yet, and maybe we won't because of the way Texas is approaching philosophically the punt game.
Well, then it makes no sense then, if that's the case, to bring in another punter through the transfer portal. If he's just doing as he's told, then I'm just speaking.
I'm with you.
Like, then why do you need to bring in someone else? Like, then just tell him, hey, great job on that 20-yard punt, man. Like, it's exactly what we need. I could have had you flip the field, but you know what? Putting it at 40 yards is exactly what we needed.
I know this. I trust Michael Kern at about a 3 on a scale of my worry meter with Kern. If he was coming back by himself, would be like a 7. But I'm at a 10 with Bert Auburn. By the end of the year, they could not, in the biggest games imaginable, field goals of over 40 yards were just an afterthought. They couldn't do it. At the end of the season, they essentially waved the flag on Bert Auburn and started coaching offense in a way that was a little more dangerous than it needed. They couldn't just take 3 points on 4th and 5 because there's a 43-yard field goal. They had to go for it. And they cannot do that again this year. I don't know where they get the guy. They know it. They do. They benched Bert Auburn in the last game of the season. We forget that because in the end, the game didn't come down to kicking. But Will Stone was the kicker in the Ohio State game.
Yes.
And I was told towards the end of the season that Will Stone was likely going to transfer. And I think the way the season ended changed all of that. I think they probably were less likely to give Will Stone a little out the door for just in case they needed a scholarship, because he does handle kickoffs. And Stone actually does a really good job at that. I don't know that I don't know we ever stop and take time to say they're good on kickoffs. But, boy, they're awful at place kicker.
Catch, I'll give you 2. I just looked it up. I'll give you punting, field goals.
What's your number, by the way? Where are you at?
Oh,
I'm a 10.
I think I put it at a 9, something like that.
I can talk you into a 10, right?
Oh, I'm Oh, I'm at a 10. I'm at 100%. If I, you know how you do, you revise your rankings.
Yes,
If I can revise my rankings 24 hours later, I probably put it as a 10.
I do that all the time on where I rank players, and then the next day I look at a guy again and I go, "Oh man, I ranked him too high," and I want to change it the next day.
Catch, where do you think Texas ranked in the SEC in punting last season?
15th?
Correct. Where do you think Texas ranked in field goals made last season, field goal percentage last season? Where do you think Texas was?
15th?
Correct and correct.
Boom!
So you nailed it.
I know they weren't worst because everybody would say that.
Correct. Second from worst in both categories.
Not as memorable.
It was Kentucky led at 93.8% of field goals made. Georgia was 2 at 91.3. Texas was at 64% of field goals made. And from a punting perspective, you've got Vanderbilt leading the league. And hell, we saw that Vanderbilt kicker, right? That dude was kicking it out the damn stadium. He averaged 48 yards, and Texas was at 40.7.
Well, and they brought in Sanborn 2 years ago. That's why I couldn't believe they didn't do it last year. Yeah. Sanborn was such a good addition. He was so good. From the first 3 quarters of the year, he was averaging almost 50 yards a punt. And it was like, oh my God, this guy might be better than Michael Dixon in terms of he didn't quite finish with Dixon level numbers. But that's the thing, man. Really good punters are really recent at this school.
Yeah.
So whenever we see a bad one, and there's a reason why I haven't reported that special team stuff, because I didn't really want to. What you just said as the counter was, if they believe that, why'd they bring in the Utah guy? Feels like a checkmate moment in the discussion. But they brought in Sanborn a couple of years ago and had so much success with it, and then ignored it last year. Again, every once in a while, this is where it's like, you know what? Texas could use a general manager who, from a talent acquisition standpoint and appraising the roster, could come to Sark and go, hey, man, can we rethink not taking a punter? Because we have an extra scholarship. And what do you think? Or kicker or any of those things. And I sometimes wonder, just from this transfer portal and just roster management, that's so much to do. I have more respect. So this will be my last point, because I know we got to wrap things up. And we did get through all of our positions. I have more respect for Steve at a time when some Texas fans, I won't say a lot, I don't know how to quantify the percentages, but we know that there's a number. There's a number of Texas fans that are pissed at Sark, red zone. They think he's not doing a good enough job with the offense. I think I find myself in 2025, now having covered Sark for as long as we have, I'm so much more impressed with his capacity as a lead guy in a program. Really, he's awesome. And I don't like everything he's done. I don't know that, just like, I work with Anwar. Like, we both love each other, but shit, man, we probably both do things at times where the other one's like, can't believe he called me Sukamel earlier today. Like, I don't know. Like, there are times when we nitpick, right? So you could nitpick Sark. But all of the stuff he does it all. He reminds me of Jerry Jones when Jerry came in and said, I'm going to do everything from the socks to the jocks. And that's kind of Sark. So I can't say enough how impressed I am with him as a leader of a program. I just think he does too much. And I think this program could just make very important marginal increased gains with just a little help. And what Sark needs is a second set of football eyeballs that if he says, hey, man, let's talk about punting for a second, Sark doesn't think, go away, I'm busy. And, eventually they're going to have that. eventually Sark's going to wave the white flag and go, you know what? This is too much. And he'll concede a little control somewhere, I think, to make his life easier. But right now, man, that guy gets an A. I don't know who in college football is doing a better job as a head coach at doing as much stuff as Sark does, because Sark's their best recruiter. Sark is their play caller. Sark is their general manager, essentially, in terms of talent evaluation. Everything goes through him. Every decision goes through him. I'm amazed at his efficiency in carrying so many duties. Even if I don't think he can maintain it forever, I'm in awe of like what he actually does, because I know I don't manage my time in that. I got a bunch of stuff I juggle too, and I always feel like I'm at a loss and never have enough time to do everything that I need to do. And Sark apparently doesn't feel that way. And like, tip of the cap to that. My God.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a couple of things, on that. He doesn't manage a lot of things, but again, Kirby Smart does that as well. And he still hasn't really had a guy that's appointed as a GM. He wants to actually have those things, and so so maybe there's just something to be said for guys like that who want to have control. The second thing, though,
how many guys do we think are like that in college football, though?
Well, how many guys are elite, though?
That's what I mean. Like, I don't think Sark, this time last year, Sark wasn't making top 10 coaching lists. You'd see those lists come out, and Sark would be like 16th. And there would be people that say he's had 1 year and everything else 7-win Steve. Like, we're getting too far ahead of ourselves. So I think Sark is an elite head coach, but I think that acknowledgement is very recent. And I don't know, like, I think they're going to be dying. I think they're dinosaurs. I don't think you're going to see a lot of hires moving forward where the head coaches do everything. So I think Kirby, Sark, I mean, I don't know enough about Ohio State's program with Ryan Day. Maybe, I don't know, but I think what Sark will be the last of a dying breed. But I think you're right. Kirby's like that. Saban would unquestionably be like that. I do wonder, though, if Saban were 50 instead of 70 and he was getting ready to enter his prime, I think because of his NFL experience, he'd be okay with a personnel guy to help, even if that person deferred to them. I do think he would do what Belichick has done, and that's get a Michael Lombardi type. And while I might ultimately be the decision maker, I will trust his voice. And it just means I don't have to watch it. You just bring me what I need to see. It's one thing to, like, if you need a wide receiver and you show him the wide receiver, and he goes, oh yeah, that guy's a badass, we'll take him. It's another thing to be like, there's 10 and we got to sort through film and decide which guy's better for us. And, oh, by the way, there's a game this weekend against Arizona State and all of these things that they deal with. Again, they
will tell you that Brandon Harris is what they need.
Oh, and he is. I just would suggest they just need something else that you don't have to call a general manager. You could just call him the grand poobah of college portal scouting. I don't care. I don't care about the titles. I don't need Brandon Harris to do all of that. I need Brandon Harris to do all this stuff that he does at A+ levels. I don't know that I need Brandon Harris watching the top 20 wide receivers in the portal and evaluating them. Like, he's got other stuff to do too. I need my guys evaluating in the portal for that to be the only thing they do. The only thing they do is we got one guy who leads our team, and all they do is scout college players and prepare us for the portal. And it's like, well, how is he at fundraising? How is he at negotiating contracts? How is he at, being Sark's right-hand man? How is he at dealing with players? I don't know. We don't ever ask him to do that. He just watches the college guys and tells us who the best players are, who fits us best. Like, that's all. And Brandon Harris, go let him be Brandon Harris. Okay. On Anwar, are we done? I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah, I just want to just close with the last thing on special teams, and just the last thing that I will continue to say will always be a thorn in my side. I don't need Texas to have 5 scholarships, and 2 of them are kickers, 2 of them punters, and 1 is the long snapper, which the long snapper has been fine. I'm not complaining against that. I just don't need Texas to have 5 scholarships eating up by those particular positions. It's a nitpick. It's a nitpick. I will continue to stay. I did it. I started on it in the beginning of last year. I will continue on it this year.
Can I retort? Because this is maybe our biggest overreaction conflict.
Go for it.
I might give special teams 8 scholarships.
You don't need that many kickers. You don't need that many punters.
Look, I agree there's redundancy on having 2 punters, and that on some level bringing in the Utah punter is an acknowledgement of a miss on Kern. I don't know. I don't know where Michael Kern. Maybe they think he'll beat Bornmeister out, and then Kern is this. I don't know.
It's free agency is always the acknowledgement that you missed in the draft.
That's fair. And look, but Lance St. Louis, I hated that offer when they made it. He's been worth it. We've never mentioned his name in his first 3 seasons, which
correct.
But he's been on the field. So that's good. And then, Auburn, Will Stone's a kickoff specialist. Auburn's the problem is not for me their scholarship allocation, although there has been redundancy in recent years that you are correct about, and I'm not gonna debate that. But if they pick the right guys, I'm completely okay with a kickoff specialist, a field goal guy, a punter, a deep snapper. Now that's 4. They've got 5 right now because they got 2 punters. But I'm even okay with adding a return specialist. I'm okay again if you had the room, because I would rather have a couple. Because the thing is, I think you recruit these guys as 1-year guys. You go get seniors. So they took Velton Gardner last year as a running back with their last scholarship, because the danger in that was minimal because he was a grad transfer. So he was going to be gone off the books no matter what. So I do like and one of the things I like about what they've done on special teams, at least right now, is St. Louis, Auburn, Stone, and Bornmeister are all off the books after this season, which would kind of indicate that they're going to be hunting for special teams specialists one way or the other. I'm okay with going high in special teams offers only because I think there are some positions where we could trim some fat. They could have 1 less wide receiver. They could have, because they don't play all their young guys. In fact, they take so many old guys that most of the young guys are like, they die. They die on the vine. So, but I agree. I know what your biggest nitpick is. It's having that many. If all those guys are playing and contributing, that's one thing. If you got a bunch of guys on scholarship and like half of them aren't playing at all, and they're not playing well, the ones that are, then it does feel like you've chosen poorly. It's like the Indiana Jones movie where the guy drinks out of the shiny cup. He chose poorly. Yes, they have.
All right, we're done, Catch.
Guys, rogueshop.com, the sponsor of the Overreaction Monday show. And look, maybe go do a bunch of shopping at rogueshop.com this week, next week, the coming weeks. In the event that the legislator messes us up and starts messing with our business, not happy with you guys, but I'm not going to get this show moved to the corral. I'm just saying we love our Rogue Shop and we love all their products, and we hope that we have access to them forever. In the event that we don't, get your orders in today and use promo code OrangeBloods and support Richard and Shar, the amazing people that run Rogue Shop. They're amazing Orange Bloods. We love them so, and we love doing this show. And for myself and Anwar Richardson, we'll say hit that like button on the way out. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. We appreciate you hanging out with us. We'll see you next Monday. Anwar, we'll see you on Tuesday for the old fashioned. I'll see you in about an hour and a half for House Divided. And if you're watching this later, like so many other people, don't worry about that whole time thing. Just know we got shows. Please watch them on Orange Bloods Live. Until then, you guys take care. See you.